podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
That's 3 losses on the bounce for Ireland to the All Blacks, and it is time to go back to the drawing board. Let's start the show. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Interpro Show, your home for all things Irish rugby from across the professional and amateur, men's and women's game in Ireland. We have Adam and David with us at the moment, both glasses on and ready to dive into this one. Ben will hopefully join us later on to look back at what was a harrowing and somber loss at Soldier Field in Chicago. And Adam, I will start with yourself. Anything good happened this weekend aside from the rugby? Are you I don't know, like a diehard Celtic fan or anything positive to
I
start on?
I was stuck in Liverpool in Halloween with no taxis, and I got back at 5 a.m. despite not being in a club since 2 a.m. So I had a pretty bad weekend. I'm also a Spurs fan as well, so that adds on to that. And
Yeah.
then, I kind of want Ulster being back because we're winning now. And it's a bit weird because it used to be the opposite way around. I used to look forward to November. Anyway.
Yeah, to be fair, I think there's a couple of Munster fans who feel the same. It's like, can we be back and just like, because it's swapped around now, but this is international window. This is where the unions and the podcasters all make their money. But David, just I will get your initial thoughts on the match first because let's stop the pleasantries about who had a nice weekend and who didn't. Some of us did, some of us didn't, but it was just one of those. Um, just sum up how you felt at full time about that Ireland performance.
I kind of felt deflated. I felt not dissimilar to how I felt at the end of the Leinster and Munster game in Croke Park, in that you're always sad to lose a game, but there's games where you're gutted because you feel like it was stolen for you or it was there for you, and then there's games where you just felt like, well, that's that. And this was that's that. In hindsight, I think it'll be one that we do look at as going, we were ahead at 60 minutes. The All Blacks didn't play great. That it could have been a victory, but yeah, no, I don't know. Like the way we were playing rugby, the way we've been playing it for a while now, a victory would have kind of felt. It's always nice to beat the All Blacks, but winning in that manner is kind of a Pyrrhic victory. So, the loss stung, but considering the manner of the performance, particularly in that last quarter, I certainly couldn't feel particularly hard done by. There's frustration, and there's more to discuss about how we played and how we will play. I'll be very anxious now going into the next 3 games, not in terms of getting wins, but in terms of how we actually perform, because there's becoming a bit of a running theme of Ireland not only not winning matches or even winning matches, but not looking particularly convincing while doing it. And I think that's something that's going to want to be addressed sooner rather than later. And with head coach Andy Farrell back from the Lions, I think that should be really top of his agenda, because it's a worrying trend, and one we'd want to solve pretty sharpish.
Yeah, that's the thing. And there it is, that just sense of deja vu. I wrote that for all things rugby about how, like, here's the key areas that Ireland got wrong last year that they also got wrong this year. Why is that a major concern? Because you never want to lose the same way twice in a row. You don't want it to just be set piece or, not taking the three or collisions or contact work, whatever it might be. But Adam, we make it onto like production levels and things like that later on, and like the nitty gritty of it all, and even the red card. But just for yourself watching it, you backed Ireland to win on this show last week. Didn't necessarily go that way. Did you get a sense, like some of us, that like with 20 minutes, maybe not 20 minutes to go, 25 minutes to go, that like, oh, you can see this slipping away? Or because we had mentioned, the three of us on last week's show, myself, yourself, and Ben, that like Ireland need to be ahead because New Zealand will finish strong, and ultimately they did.
Yeah, I think there was a moment. I think the second half was probably one of the weakest second halves we've seen well, probably since the last time we played New Zealand, to be honest with you, or maybe even France or England.
Well,
You would.
to jump in there, the Argentina game last year was arguably the one where it's like
Oh
we had
yeah,
this big lead and we got out of dodge.
Yeah.
potentially that one. But yeah,
But we can, and the way that this team is set up is that we can't afford to chase games. And as soon as New Zealand got ahead, I was like, "That's game. That's game. That is game." Our heads went down. It was almost like a complete, change in behaviors. We still had James Lowe celebrating for Barrett making an all right kick find, which I found a bit odd. We really need to stop. You know, I'm sure all of us were slagging when Ben Earl did a wee dance against us with a ruck. We don't want to be the team that's doing the tiny wins, because once we don't get the tiny wins and it turns out to be quite a bad loss due to the last quarter, it just blows up. That's going to be the thing that people speak about. That's the thing. Like, it was a reaction that I saw sort of online, was just like, oh, James Lowe did that dance and they still got beat by a lot. I'm not saying that you know we need to create our own atmosphere, which I do get on the pitch. But I just feel like as soon as we get we start losing, our heads dip down. We sort of look defeated. We looked ready and out. And by the time that they scored that second try, I was just like, yeah, that's been coming. They were just absolutely dislodging us in every sort of aspect in those last 15 minutes. That's why when you think about our recent wins against New Zealand, that's why it's been so important having such a big margin of tries against them to get points against them. We even actually saw in, what was it, 2013, when they came 21 points behind. That's how important it is for New Zealand, because I think I said as well in the last podcast, New Zealand are still New Zealand. No matter how odd their rugby championship has went, they can still pull out a performance. And the likes of Scott Robertson needs that performance, because he's on a pretty shallow slope in terms of New Zealand media, from what they've been saying on commentary and things like that, and reaction, and how much he's lost already. That he needs that performance. But objectively, I don't think it was a great game for a neutral, to be honest with you. It was one of those where everything was malfunctioning. The New Zealand lineup was misfunctioning. Ireland's lineup was misfunctioning. The scrum was misfunctioning. There was a weird red card that I'll say it now, didn't affect anything, in my opinion. I don't think Ty Burn would have made that much of a difference in the game. I think it would have went a bit easier on Ireland's behalf, but I think we would have just been looking knackered anyway by the time we get to the 80th minute.
yeah, that's it. And like we'll get on to set piece, as well. And just like New Zealand, to their credit, like clinical was the buzzword that
Yeah.
everyone used. When they had their chances, they took them. Again, when I did that analysis for all things rugby, like Ireland consistently are losing the efficiency, scoring efficiency to New Zealand, and by like 2 points per entry every single time. Ireland have had no problem getting up the field, but New Zealand's bend don't break defense is much stronger than Ireland's in the same fixture. Ultimately, now in fairness, New Zealand did score one try from deep, like very deep, where what was it, two phases?
Yeah,
Was that a two-phase score? Fainuku
think
finds
so. Yeah.
Jordan, Jordan breaks. They score maybe three phases when Surveyor scores in the corner. They're lethal like that, but it's not just that. They just looked, when New Zealand got into position, they looked like they come away with something. When Ireland did, they didn't. And like one of the only things that myself and yourself, David, we mentioned it here before we started, I thought Ireland kicked really well. But why did Ireland have to kick 31 times? Because they were losing key collisions every single time. And if you go back to 2023, because a lot of people have gone back to 2023 this week, Ireland were either winning those collisions or they're in positions where it was a hell of a lot easier to win them through the chip on passes, the smarter running lines. The only time Ireland looked like their old selves was that Tadhg Furlong score, because every carry looked to have that, to be on the front foot, to be at the right angle, to be beating the first man, and to be getting over the gain line on every single carry. But anyways, that's for a little bit later. But of course, as I said, we don't have Ben with us just yet. We might get his thoughts later if he does make it on. But I suppose I just want to start with how it went wrong. And David, like some of those fatal flaws we'll talk about in a minute, or talk about now, because set piece is the one we can't avoid at the moment. it's ultimately, if you've no set piece in international rugby, and it's not none, but if you've a weaker set piece in international rugby than your opponent, you're probably going to lose more often than not. And ultimately, that was part of Ireland's downfall. 69% line out. That's going to kill you, and it killed Ireland in this game.
Yeah, and it's just such a momentum killer as well. It's, like our scrum was imperfect and that can cause issues in terms of penalty concession, but having a faulty line out where you can't build an attacking platform from it reliably, it really does just kill your ability to launch proper attacks of the game. The line out is such a standard for an attacking platform that when it doesn't work, it really robs you of a significant portion of where a lot of teams get their points. And like I said, like in terms of momentum, you say you get your penalty advantage or you get your penalty kick and you decide to kick down the line. You could have an instance like Jack Hurley had where he kicks an unbelievable 40-meter banana kick and suddenly you're in a great attacking position and I actually don't remember how the line out off that went, but to get yourself into that position, that should be the hard part. Getting the penalty, getting the kick down the line, that should be the hard part. The drilling of the line out. Yeah, there's going to be the other team going up to compete, but it's such a drillable skill. It should be such a drillable skill and something they should be able to practice so much that when it goes wrong so frequently and the mistakes seem to particularly at that first line out, it seemed like there was a complete miscommunication between Dan Sheehan and the jumpers and just nobody got into the air for it. It's if that happened in a club game, your coach would be yelling at you. For it to happen in a test match of this magnitude of this on this scale is unforgivable, but it's puzzling. It's a really odd thing to have happen. And this isn't the first time that Ireland have had problems with their set piece. It isn't the first time they've had problems with their line out. So for it to be such a consistent problem is both worrying and slightly confusing because you would have thought it would be something that they could identify and fix. And until they do, it's going to really hamper the attack, which has suffered. Like our attack has been poor. I looked back on stats from the Six Nations. We came third. We scored 17 tries, I think it was. England scored 25. France scored 30. Second lowest for meters made. Second lowest for offloads. Second lowest for line breaks. Lowest for defenders beaten. Like the reason that we kicked is because we had no other way of getting the ball up the pitch, and
Yeah.
and that's worrying because when we had if we had a system completely built on impenetrable defense, that'd be one thing, but we don't. That's not what this Ireland team is. We're not Jack Nienaber's South Africa. So, and it's particularly frustrating given how potent the attack looked in 22 and 23. And there's still a lot of the same personnel there. There's still the same coach there. So it's a that when I talked earlier about being anxious about seeing the next three games, that's a large part of what I'm talking about because we can beat Japan without playing super well, and we can probably edge our way past Australia without playing super well. But it won't really tell us much, and it won't really give us any kind of um, sense that when it comes to the big matches in the Six Nations and then beyond, we're only 2 years away from a World Cup, that we'll be able to show up. Because right now, when I look at Ireland's attack, we don't have the platform of the line out. When I look at our attack and open play, I don't know what our attack is. I don't know what the actual aim is. If I had to go right down in one paragraph what the plan is, I would be really confused about what that paragraph is supposed to look like because as it stands, I'm not 100% sure what we're trying to do a lot of the time.
I think from my perspective, it is get the ball to width and get one-on-one matchups between O'Brien slash Hansen and Lowe against their opposite man. That's what Ireland did against England when they finally clicked into gear a little bit against Scotland, where they scored two tries in the corner as well. Just get into those marks. But 2023, it was smart running lines. Everyone in the pod was a carry option. Everyone was a tip on option. Latching was better. It was better across the board. And you mentioned those stats, and they were mentioned in other podcasts as well. And I won't name them for obvious reasons, but the what really stood out to me was there was almost a sense from certain pundits, not all, but some, of like, God, where did this come from? And I was like, guys, it's kind of the same as the Ireland New Zealand game last year. Similar enough to Ireland Australia last year, where ultimately Ireland just had too much for them. Similar to Ireland England in some regard, and similar to Ireland France, except I think France were much better on the day than Ireland or New Zealand ever looked like getting to in this game. I'm like, this was coming. This idea of like some people have said, oh, they just didn't pitch up on the day. I'm like, I'm not sure if you can say that. I think you could have said that 12 months ago for this fixture last year, where Ireland were 19 games unbeaten at home, where they'd just beaten the Box and won a championship. Now you track since then. Yes, Ireland went on a 6 game winning run in the middle, but very similar loss New Zealand this time. A I think a win over Argentina that gets better with time. The longer we see Argentina, the more we see them improve. Fiji, it was what it was. Australia wasn't hectic. England didn't know how to win then. I think they do now. I think that's what's scary for Ireland and France is they know how to win again. Scotland don't know how to beat Ireland. Wales was just an abject performance. The French game was what it was. But Ireland have the player quality. This is the thing, Ireland have the player quality to get over the line in those games. But when you're going up against New Zealand and your combined 15 is a maximum of 8 or 9 Irish at most, even with your bias, you're going to need more. You're going to need your set piece to fire. You're going to need your defense to be making more than, 80% of their tackles. You're going to need things like that to click. And Adam, to kind of touch on the set piece point, but also everything else in general, a theme of the week I seem to see now is, oh, well, Goodman won't be happy with the attack, and Easterby won't be happy with the defense, and Fogarty won't be happy with the scrum, and O'Connell won't be happy with the line out. And these are absolutely true. But are we also missing the fact that, we can't just praise Andy Farrell when it goes well and then criticize the assistant coaches when it goes wrong as well? Because, like, ultimately, this is a team that has regressed. This is not 2023 Ireland. We didn't just have one fatal flaw like that quarterfinal where I think set piece was probably the big differentiator in that game. This is a number of things. This is on everyone, including the bagman, including the content creators, including, everyone has a part to play in this. Like, are we picking and choosing where to talk about in some ways? Not us, obviously, because I've asked you the question, but just in the general sense.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think when Andy Farrell's, uh, I think, being found out in tactics, I think that's the way to sort of put it. I think what we have had for many years is a very efficient, cohesive team. 2023 was sort of the highlight of that. That was the high. 2024 was the start of the dip, and we're still down at that dip. It's sort of like with all great like rugby coaches, bar like the ones that haven't really been found out, like Razzie Erasmus when it comes to a World Cup,
Well, even at
Steve
that, just let me
Hansen.
jump in there. Their World Cup block between 2019 and 2023 wasn't all that
Wasn't,
impressive.
yeah,
Do you
but
know?
but
Like,
they were building a squad then though. They were
mm.
building a completely new squad. Like they had
And then
they
they
had
went
a
back to the old squad anyway to win the World Cup,
they
so it
were,
didn't make a
yeah,
difference.
then they went back to the old squad. But I don't think Ireland could afford to do that. We have a team full of players that are well aging rapid. Well, everyone's aging rapidly. Philosophy, Adam. Philosophy. Anyway, but like we've got a team that Bundy's going to be 37 by the time the next World Cup comes around. You have the likes of Furlong, who's well, Beelam's going to be 36. Furlong's going to be 35 odd. You've got, it's not a team like when you look at the bench. I know he played relatively okay. We mentioned before the call that Ian Henderson isn't a test lock anymore, but he did okay. He did what he needed to do. He had a couple of penalties. There was a couple of rucks, yes, but as we say, there's no necessarily player that played necessarily really great. But you have the likes of Ian Henderson who's on the bench. When you look at the likes of, uh, you know, a Dogbo in Munster. You have, Harry Sheridan's coming up through the way in Ulster. You've got loads of other players that you can think of that we need now in the next 2 years to basically nurture them to get to that Ireland standard, because we at the minute the big elephant in the room that people seem to sort of regress talking about because we've got these untouchable central contract players, the likes of the poster boys, I like to call them. You've got your like um Bundy, who hasn't necessarily played well against New Zealand. I'm sure I'm going to get proved wrong. He's going to have a smashing game against Australia or something like that. But you have the likes of um Tag Burn, who is pretty good still. But like you have those players who, the Ireland social media post players that are always going to be there. And you would argue that loads of people really love those players and they're worldwide names. Bundy Aki's applause when he came on the pitch was louder than any try that Ireland scored. Like we've got the big name players, but I feel like we're using them way too much to be like, he's not going to be in the World Cup. He's not going to make the America World Cup. Do you know what I mean?
Can I throw a
2031.
comparison out there, actually? And this is, I know what I've said about this particular team in the past, and I think they're absolutely fraudulent. I do not think Ireland is fraudulent. But you know the way when I've said about the Sharks that they have this brilliant top player, and then after that it's a bit untested? I think Ireland are going that way, where it's like when that first 23 clicks, they are still brilliant. And I think like the second half against England and Australia last year, or in that period, good examples of that. That game against Scotland. But every once in a while you'll lose a guy and there'll be a couple of injuries. And it was only when I watched something back there yesterday. Like people forget, Ireland went into that start of the 2023 Grand Slam. Gibson Park had an injury, Furlong had an injury. Robbie Henshaw and Bundy Aki were both out injured at the same time. Or maybe Ringrose. I'm pretty sure Ringrose played against France and against Wales. Like there was a good few injuries in that team, but there was no drop off. And I'm not saying that the lads who came in were drop off. I actually thought like McCarthy did well. Thought Henderson did well for what was
Yeah.
expected of him. But it just doesn't feel like it feels like Ireland's
No.
floor has slipped. And I think
And
that's the concern there. And you mentioned the big name players. They've been
yeah.
getting Ireland out of dodge in a couple of games recently. You think of, say, Byrne against Australia,
Yeah.
for example, just to use that one, or Sheehan against England when he was off on the bench, which,
But
maybe there's something in that because he was so good off the bench. But it does feel like, you're that
you know,
reliance. You can't keep relying on those guys.
Uh, oh no, like Shane the least has got another two World Cups in him. Do you know what I mean? That's what I
Oh, yeah.
mean. Like you have the likes of Byrne and Aki that can probably touch the next World Cup. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the thing. Like I think we always talk about the fact that our four center partnerships are all over the age of 30. They're all sort of hitting different times of their career. Robbie Henshaw's lost a yard of pace that doesn't like he's still a very good player, but he's lost a yard of pace. He isn't the Robbie Henshaw that we had 10 odd years ago. Do you know
Well,
what I
well,
mean?
that's the thing. He played in the World Cup 10 years ago. Do you
Yeah,
know, like
exactly.
Connacht won the
He's
He
league
been
played
nine
he
years
played in
ago.
this game 10 years ago. Like he
Yeah,
was the
yeah, yeah.
you know so
that's
it's
the, and
notable he
that
didn't
that
get
all
picked
adds
for
up.
this
And
one.
like
Like
Father Time is
Yeah,
undefeated. That's what they say. And like
yeah.
even in golf, Father Time is undefeated. There's a reason why only
Yeah.
one major winner has been over the age of 50. And I don't want to touch on just age, but I think when you talk about getting new faces in, look at what the Ireland XV team is going to be picked at the weekend, and how many people in that team that people would like or that supporters would love to see play in Japan. I'm thinking Dan Kelly, Jude Postlethwaite, Jack Murphy, Nathan Doak, Scotty Wilson. I know he's not uncapped with the two props like Milne and Tom O'Toole as well. Tom Stewart is also capped. Rob Balakoon. People would love to see them against Japan. And don't get me wrong, playing Spain is good and it's good for the wider game. And I think whoever plays loose head for Ireland that day will get a test against Joan Merkler, like a European winning tight head with Toulouse. They don't sign duds. Do you know, he's a proper player. But that's just part for this. Like you go into this weekend and I actually think, and it's such a stupid thing to say because you should never base your selection off of what the fans want, even if every once in a while throw them a bone, it will help. It'll help your approval rating. Pick Tom Farrell. Honest to God, I think if Andy Farrell selects Tom Farrell at the weekend, there will be such a talking point around him, and so many rugby fans on the island will be happy for him that it would just ease a little bit of pressure. Because Tom Farrell's not going to make you lose. Like he could make you win by more than Gary Ringrose just because like he's not a better player than Ringrose, but he's a phenomenal attacking player. Do you know? And like Ireland are looking for those little wins. And David, you said about being anxious. Absolutely. because you're at the point now where Ireland went from this team is unstoppable, and the space of 18 months you're going, geez, this team could get caught by a banana skid of Australia, and then South Africa deservedly will be favourites. And then that's where the concern kicks in, rightfully so. But I was going to move on, and I do want to touch on New Zealand really, really quickly. Again, we don't really do that every week, but it is New Zealand. And Adam, like, clinical is not the word. They were just ruthless. And I think what really stood out to me was they have that dog in them. I don't think Razor wants them playing this style. I think he's just getting them to point B, but
Yeah.
because they have to roll up their sleeves every once in a while. And like the two men in particular that stood out to me, well, there's a couple, like the two second rows, Holland and Lord, were excellent, for instance. But Fine Anuku and Sachiti off the bench, like
Yeah.
the level of ballast, the level of power, they won every collision. And ultimately, it's a contact sport. Collisions are going to help.
Like, I feel like with New Zealand, they were. I didn't even think they got into like fourth gear that game. I didn't think they necessarily played that well in the first half, and then it hit the 60th minute, and then you two were like, "Oh, oh goodness, we're the All Blacks." They were all looking at each other, just going, "Oh yeah, we're New Zealand," and then it just started to just play. I just Mackenzie came on, and it was almost like I forgot that Mackenzie was on the bench, and then I was like, "Oh great." I think we were losing by a point by that stage, and I was like, "Oh great!" And then I think Ben mentioned last week, he mentioned how it was like, "Oh, go on, Damien, score 5 tries," but he created 2 tries essentially, and you're like, we didn't have somebody on the bench that could replicate that. We don't
Well,
have somebody that
even if
can,
we did, they didn't come
even
on
if we
early
did.
enough.
Oh yeah,
Do you know?
exactly. Like we didn't have like, the way that France have Jalabert and Ntamak. All Blacks have Barrett and Mackenzie. We don't have like a healthy, like a really mad playmaker to come off the bench who's quick, who's fast, who does everything well, a bit flashy. You know, could come up with 15 minutes to play. I'm not saying I'm saying that Crawley and Prendergast are different types of players to that. They are players that really like to control the game, whilst Mackenzie likes the flash, likes the flash, likes the zip, likes everything about the game. Like he enjoys it. He can start a game, he can end a game, and it can change. I think that's where, as you mentioned, the two others that came off the bench, I think their bench in general, I was just like coming on. And every time somebody came on, I was just like, oh, great. There's another one that comes on, fresh legs, good running at him.
Takiaho had a carry at one stage where it's like this man is just so much fresher than everyone on the field.
Yeah.
Replacements, subs, lads in the
And,
stands. He just looked
and
so much
but
pop.
but the thing is, though, this is an All Blacks team without Jordy Barrett and without Scott Barrett. That is
Yeah.
terrifying. So they lost Scott Barrett in and around the time that we lost Byrne. They lost Jordy
Mhm.
Barrett about 10 or so minutes after that. That's why I say that the red card wasn't really affecting the game. We played better with the 14 men than we did when they were just finding their feet, and then they
Yeah.
found their feet and they excelled. Like this is an All Blacks
Ultimately,
team.
Ireland were 10-0 up in this game,
Yeah, they
at
were.
one stage, and it finished 26-13.
Yeah,
And that's the annoying thing. Like,
Well, we
I
scored we
know
scored
it's
3 points in 63 minutes. Like you can't do
63
that in
minutes was
regular
the
yeah.
number.
sport.
I couldn't remember what it was. Yeah. And like, that is
It's
like,
not clinical enough.
I was down in Thomond Park. The first score in that game was 18 minutes and it finished 31-28. And I know they're like that's a friendly and it was friendly vibes, don't get me wrong. But like that just kind of shows just how long that is in rugby. Like 3 minutes is not a
Yeah,
lot. And like that 3 minutes, I know people are like, oh, Crowley missed a kick a goal. Probably on the edge of his range. He got one afterwards anyways. That came from the fact that Ireland got the ball back. But again, to kind of use like the kicking game or the collisions game, if Tommy O'Brien gathers that kick, maybe. If Osborne gathers that pass, maybe. They were not wrong plays. They were not poor
no,
execution. They were just that half a second off. The pressure
No,
from New
well,
Zealand.
Tommy O'Brien was also running too. Like that should have been
Oh yeah,
called.
no, like New
yeah.
Zealand. New Zealand did a lot of things well. One of the things they did well was their
Oh,
blocker lines were like peak Saracens.
Yeah.
yeah.
And ultimately, as I always say with these things, you gotta fight fire with fire.
It's
Do you know?
it. It was
That's the thing.
classic all. It was
The-
classic All Blacks, and looking at the rule book, going, "How can we mend it?" Buden Barrett
Yeah.
calling the mark off the pitch was one of the weirdest plays I've ever seen. And they were like, "Does he even say?" They were like on the commentary going, "Does he even say Mark when he calls
Well, I
it?"
was in
He
the pub,
doesn't.
so I don't know
There
what the
was
commentary was saying, but I did not see his lips move in
there was
in
no
that
lips
replay.
moving. He came off the pitch and he was just like, "Oh, Mark, by the way," and the referee allowed it. And I was just like,
I'm
it's
gonna
those
bring David back
margins.
in here if you don't mind, Adam. I would love to talk about that mark decision. I'd love to talk about the red card, but I am conscious we're recording on Tuesday night, and we may hear a decision by the time we finish recording. So I'm just conscious of maybe, waiting just in case. But is there anything else that stood out to you, David? Because we've touched on set piece, defense, and attack to a little bit. Is there anything that you looked at watching that game and thought, I'm not saying spooked, or it could be something that impressed you? Like Stuart McCluskey, I think, deserves a mention before we wrap things up on last week's game. Is there anything else you'd like to bring to the floor?
Um, yeah, no, McCluskey does. No, I guess, there were instances of Tommy Bryant, the chip over the top was an example. Osborne dropping or not getting the offload was another example. There's
And then
instances
there was
where,
the ring was one as well. We mentioned the first half
there
should
was a
probably,
Ringrose one as well.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, it just, there's those little moments where that had they come off, things would have gone, you could have said would have gone differently, and it would have been different. It's just this overrunning sense of almost apathy, of a weird disconnect. And I don't know if it's Lions hangovers are a real thing, and most of this team were on that Lions tour. So
just ask 2019 Saracens or
that's
2018 Saracens, I should say.
yeah. So like it happens, but even if Leo Cullen pretended he didn't know what it was, like it does happen. So there's a lot more road to run, and this is the first game of the series. So my hope would be that we can build from here, going on. But I think the big takeaway for me from this game was like any pundit who said that this was they didn't show up on the day, or that it was an unexpected thing. It wasn't. It's the latest in a run of things. The biggest thing for me coming out of this is that um there is very little goodwill. There's very little credit in the bank. This is now a time when they need to start building it back up. Because I
Why,
think in
why do you
terms
think that
of
is, David, from your perspective?
I think it's because I mean there's couple elements. You could say like obviously there's we've talked about representation. Representation is a factor that gets overlooked. But I think the overriding thing is, well, the two things are it's winning and it's looking good doing it. And like you can forgive almost anything when you win, because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. South Africa won a World Cup by winning three games by a single point in a row. One where they outscored a team, one where they just muscled a team, and then the final. So, how you get to the finish line doesn't matter if you get there first, but you got to keep doing that. And as soon as you screw up, as soon as you slip up, if you're not playing well and doing other things well as well at the time, the goodwill is going straight away. You need to be perfect if that's your route. And so Ireland are not perfect. They finished, even though they won four games. It's easy to forget in the Six Nations. Ireland won four out of five games. They won the Triple Crown, but they finished third, and they finished worse than they started. So it feels a lot sour. It feels a lot more sour in their mouth. But I think the biggest thing is that we've seen Irish teams play well. We've seen them play really nice, really fluid attacking rugby.
Yeah.
So to even though, losing one game in the Six Nations, if we went three from four in autumn, four from five in the Six Nations, on paper, that is not a bad year. But if we do it playing mealy mouth rugby, where it's not exciting to watch, it's not, you can't look at it and go, oh, wasn't that lovely skill, you know, because we've kicked 100 up and unders in the hope that one will break our way. I think it's the style. I think it's people like to watch nice rugby, and we haven't been playing nice rugby, and you can get away with that if you're winning. But as soon as you stop winning, which we have now done, the goodwill goes straight away. And then every it's like any fight. When things start to go bad, all of the old bad stuff comes up. So it becomes, why aren't you picking my player? It becomes, why should I care about this team? It becomes, why are the tickets so expensive? Everything comes up. So I think it's because we focused on, and like I said it before, Andy Farrell's number one mandate is to win matches. And as long as he can do that, that's really all he needs to stand over. But once that stops, if you don't have the representation and you don't have the good play underneath it, then there's no goodwill sitting underneath it. And I think because we finished the Six Nations so poorly, um, we're at a low ebb. And hey, look, if we're in the middle of a World Cup cycle and we're at a low ebb, that's not a terrible thing. Rassie Erasmus only took over the Springboks 2 years out from the 2019 World Cup and pulled them right back up. So, anything is possible. And we might be in a situation where, Adam talked a lot about the age profile of the players, where we're suddenly forced to overhaul a lot of the team and things change fast. That can happen. Even you don't want it to happen, but you look at people like Jamie Heaslip and Paul O'Connell. Careers can end like that. It doesn't really matter what age you are. So things can change. And if the change is forced and it's good change, it won't matter in the end that it was forced. But I think we just find ourselves in a situation now where we're losing games that we don't feel like we should always be losing, and we're looking bad doing it. And I think looking bad while doing it is almost worse than the losing. Because if you can die on your shields, at least you can go out with a bit of pride. But when you have to slink away afterwards, and that's what it felt like. When you asked before at 80 minutes what it felt like slinking away. And I think that's really hard for fans to swallow.
I mean, a fantastic answer. Like I agree with the vast majority of it anyways, at least. And I think like everything is habitual. Everything is a habit. Winning is a habit. People get used to winning. I think that's, we in Ireland have an unbelievable sporting culture. We also have an unbelievable bandwagon sporting culture. Do you know what I mean? Like that's just the reality of it. One of the sporting moments of the year is Rory McIlroy. One of the next ones is Shane Lowry. How many people watch golf on a weekly basis? I'm a huge golf fan. I don't watch golf on a weekly basis. Do you know what I mean? But like it's habitual, and I think I am concerned that Ireland's kind of wolf at the door mantra of like, oh no, we have to win. We have to win. That catches up on you eventually. And I am a believer that winning if you win now and you go on a great one, that's fine. But if you're just eking out wins, you're probably stealing them from the future to a certain degree. Not always, but to a certain degree. And I've got that sense about Ireland before. The South African tour, I think, is a good example. I think Ireland could have easily went down there with a rotated squad and gotten two defeats, and maybe not heavy ones, but you'd probably rather have that. Do you know, in hindsight, you'd probably rather have that. I think that papered over the cracks. And yeah, it is concerning. But I hear them on about world ranking points. And yeah, world ranking points are fine and you want to be in that top seed, but at the same time, like it's gonna take a minor miracle for Ireland to just fall out of the top six.
Yeah.
Do you know?
It, it,
Like you should be backing yourself to beat Australia and Japan anyways, and that'll
oh yeah.
secure it. So that's where it gets a little bit like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you know? Adam, final
Like,
word on last week?
world ranking points don't mean anything in terms of we still had New Zealand and the other option was France. World
Well,
ranking
yeah,
points don't mean a
for the last
complete.
World Cup, yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
absolutely.
Like if to use that World Cup, as the example, is we went in as what, number one, number two in the world, and we still got New Zealand and France. World ranking points don't mean like a lot. And as you said, we're not going to drop out of the top six. We're not going to do what Wales have done and just went. Whew. We're
Yeah,
not. We've got
that's
we've
that's
got
not going to
enough
happen. That's the
resources
thing.
for it.
None of us think that's going to happen. We all
No.
believe here that we can have these selection debates because the players are
Yeah.
there. It's more about like we're asking the question, would we rather see, and I'm going to pick his name because he's in the front row, Scott Wilson against Japan or against Spain? Do you know, we're asking that question. We're not asking, oh my God, have we enough numbers to field a team against Spain? That's an entirely different question. Do you know what I mean? Um, and I was gonna do Munster Argentina at this juncture of the pod. But Ben is not here. Ben was at that one. I was covering it for RG. So we'll just move on. We'll move on to this weekend. Ireland against Japan. As I said, the Tadhg hearing is taking place at the moment. So I think we can almost assume he's going to be available, even though if I don't think he'd play anyways. And Stuart McCluskey is a doubt with a groin injury. listened to him in the post-match mix zone. I should know this. I'm the journalist in the room. In the mix zone after the game, and he sounded pretty optimistic. He sounded like, "I was just a strain. It'll be fine." So they're the only injury doubts. No late call-ups. And I'm looking ahead, like it's such a damned if you do, damned if you don't game. Japan conceded 60 points at the weekend. Do you know, like Ireland should wipe the floor with them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the vibes in Ireland camp aren't going to be perfect this week, naturally, after a loss like that. And there's going to be a pressure on, and it's going to be a home game. So, like, if Ireland do win by 60, it's, well, Japan are awful. And we're going to end up being here this time next week talking about, do Japan deserve to be in the World Nations Championship next year? If Ireland win by 10 points, it's, oh my God, something's wrong. Do you know, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
The end is nigh. So, like, this is where I always feel sympathy for a province, for Leinster, for Ireland. You cannot win this week. You simply cannot win, can you?
No, not at all. I think the only reason, like, uh, if we lose, but if we win by 10 points, I almost see that as a win in Eddie Jones's book, and that's why I don't like it. I just don't like that, man. I just
You
feel
you
like,
wouldn't be the only one. I hear Danny Care might be about to come
yeah,
on the pod next week to give
yeah.
his experiences.
But imagine. But yeah, I feel like it's a really weird situation where we're probably gonna start a mixed bag of players, but the mixed bag of players that you want playing are playing in Spain. You want your Nathan Dokes, of course, as you said at the start. You want your Finton Guns being in the Aviva on Saturday. You want your Scotty Wilsons and stuff in the Saturday. But this Ireland Japan game needs to have something completely different. I would want like a Casey starting. I would want Gibson Park on the bench because I thought that he had an all right game, and I'd be interested to see what he can do off the bench as well. I would want to see like a nice like complete like change up. I would like to see Osborne keep his spot. I would like to see O'Brien keep his spot. Maybe put in Stockdale. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there's fine tunings here that we can do, but we don't want a full strength team out there. I think the last time we played Japan, we started like the likes of Johnny Sexton, and he had a 100 cap sword given to him.
That was 100th cap game. Do you know what else happened in
Yeah,
that game? Because it's topical in the news at the moment, is that fucking idiot Jarvo went onto the field for the
yeah,
anthems, and
yeah.
the fact that no one bashed his head in that day and still hasn't done it to this day is a concern. Johnny Sexton should
Yeah,
have wielded the big sword. Didn't have to hit him,
it's
just
like
chase him. But
in
that was
like
that game. Sexton scored
it,
100th. Was it his 100th?
it was 100 cap because that's why they gave him the samurai
Yeah,
sword. Yeah, that's why
yeah.
they gave him the
But
samurai.
yeah,
And we
that was
played
the
in
last time Ireland played them.
a horrible maroon color. So this is going to be our away shirt game. This is going to be actually no, South
Uh,
Africa. South Africa is
South
going to be our
Africa,
away
yeah.
shirt game. So South
What is
Africa's going to be our
Ireland's
away
away
shirt game.
shirt? It's white again,
It's
isn't it?
a white with a green splat on it.
No, they've changed it, I think.
Oh,
That was
have
what it
they?
was
Oh,
for
right.
the Six Nations.
Oh, yeah, of
Ireland,
course.
if they could just use the away
But
kit that the women's had at the World Cup, that was
yeah, I would like that,
exquisite.
yeah. But
Um,
I think we'd want change in this team. We would want to see a more attacking game because to be honest with you, watching
I
the
should say
Ireland
it's a plain
attack,
white. It's a plain white.
oh, it's playing right. Watching the Ireland attack was really like it was just boring. It was really there was nothing really there. We need to see some line breaks. We need to see some actual creativity because I felt like there was something completely missing. Yes, in the forwards, of course, with the set piece, but there was no go forward from the backs. I think Stuart McCluskey was the only one to have go forward in the backs and less kicking. Um, less kicking. I think Kaelin's just dropped his laptop there, but I think
No,
there's.
no, I just had
He's
to
like,
grab something.
oh, but I feel like we need to see something different. I feel like there needs to be a different. Rome wasn't built in a day, and I'm not saying completely throughout the tactic book. However, we need to see a more attacking game from Ireland. We need to actually see the knife getting twisted and actually seeing a game getting played out where we score points because
I, I'm
Saturday
gonna
deeply depressed me.
I'm gonna throw a question to David based on that 2021 game. Ireland said in 2021 Six Nations, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Just wait with us. will click. Obviously, Ireland didn't have as many players in the Lions tour that year. They went out, they played Japan, they put like 50, 60 points on them as well. Everything clicked into gear. That was the start of New Ireland, this unbelievable attacking, slick team who just looked so well drilled. David, you're usually a confident man. Or, sorry,
Yeah.
confident. We're Irish. None of us here are confident.
Optimistic.
No, you said
Optimistic.
New Zealand. You said New Zealand to win last week, and
Yeah,
I
well, so
found
did
that
I.
Jinx
But
mad. But
I'm asking the question.
anyway,
We've forgiven, we forget. Um, but David, what's the chances that we do see one of those performances where everything just clicks for Ireland, and maybe the shackles come off, or maybe even just as simple as like Fiji game last year, after about 20 minutes you realize you're going to win, and it's like, okay, here we go, and we get that confidence booster, and we roll into the Australia game with a pep in our step, and asking, this guy was rotated in, does he start? This guy was rotated in, do we start him? You know, do you think that's likely? Because I do. I firmly believe Ireland's second team is much better than Japan, and that if Craig
Yeah.
Casey and Sam Prendergast start, they'll put their hand up. Do you think so?
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think that like at a fundamental level, I think we have the players. Like we have the team. So, and like it is, I think you actually make a really good point there because it's really easy to forget with how good we were from 21 to 23. It's really easy to forget how dire things seemed. I think because COVID happened and the whole world lost its
yeah,
mind for a while there.
It was
But
so
like
bad we almost lost to Scotland.
we lost him.
yeah.
Yeah, I know back when Wales are still good, but like it's easy to forget like, Billy Burns kicked the ball dead over the line and that was his career kind of up to,
Hey, ho,
like
wait, whoa! I won't take any Billy Burns slander. Sorry.
Sorry, I'll mute.
no,
I'll
it was a
mute.
bad
I'll
day.
mute
I
Adam.
felt
I'll
bad.
mute him.
I felt bad for Billy. I don't think he deserved to be at Nazir that much. But like that was a hard day, and like there were a lot of hard days where people were going, "Why is Mike Cat? What's he doing in there? Like what is the idea behind any of this?"
Similar
And
to
then
what's being said about Goodman.
yeah, it's not dissimilar now. So like, look, I think we do have the players. Like they are there, and I took a lot of. It was a particularly bad start for Leinster this year in the URC as well. So I had to reassure myself by saying players don't become magically terrible overnight. Um, and so as much as we might like to see more team turnover, and we would like to see that, we know that the lads who are in there now are good players, and we know that there are lads the level behind them, Craig Casey, and then like maybe a Tom Farrell, and then even people like Carl Ford in Connacht and Jude Postlewaite. I don't know why I'm picking just centers, but like up in Ulster, like there's players there. So like it can take even as we said Robbie Henshaw he was 9 years ago, so he was 23 in that
He made his Ireland debut in 2012 or 13, I think. 13, I think.
yeah, but it means that if he's 32 now, which he is because we're the same age, it means that he was 23 in Soldiers Field in Chicago, which is quite. Imagine if we had a 22-year-old in the centers like on Saturday. So like we have the players. And if the coaches have any merit behind them, and I would like to believe that they do, then yeah, I think that we could be a couple of because like we said that again, the Osborne knock, the Ringrose drop, Tommy O'Brien getting interfered with makes it a lot more suspect. But like, there was the ideas are there. These are good players and I think good coaches, and I think if they can pull it together, then I would be really excited to see what it could be. I just hope they do because I like watching good rugby. I like winning, but I like watching good rugby, and I'd
Yeah.
like to watch us play some.
Yeah, well, that just reminds me, I made a mistake last week where I was like, oh, sure, none of us are going to be at these games. I'm at this game on Saturday in a working capacity. I completely
I'm
forgot about
at,
that.
I wasn't there, so that's why you said that. I'm at all
That's
three of
why
these
I was free to
games.
say it. I was like, Ben doesn't go to these games and Adam is in a different country. Sorry. Again, I had to just move the wire there. It's kind of underneath my legs. Um, but yeah, no, like this is what people want. They want to be entertained. They want Ireland to throw the ball around. The Fiji game last year felt like, oh yeah, no, like this is that first half against Argentina is where we're at, not the second half. But then come Australia was like, oh no, it was the second half. Oh damn
Yeah.
it, maybe Fiji weren't that good. And you will have that in games like these, like the new format from next year. And this is only in my head because I was talking about it at work the other day. Means that you're gonna be playing 6 games, three in summer, three in November, maybe an extra one if you want to try and squeeze it in where you're going to be playing Japan and Fiji, maybe even Georgia, although I think they're going to be ring fenced out again, and you're probably going to put a score on them. Do you know you're gonna want to, and you will have that damned if you do, damned if you don't attitude. But at the same time, you want to have a situation where, and I look at these next 3 weeks almost as a mini block of excuse me, yeah, we make 8 to 10 changes this week. Do you know, start maybe. I know Andrew Porter was up for media today. Maybe start Paddy McCarthy. Do you know, maybe start Tom Ahern second row and Doris comes back in, Casey and Prendergast and Tom Farrell, as I said earlier, and retain Tommy O'Brien and Jamie Osborne. And then for Australia, if Casey plays well, give him that game and have Sam or Gibson Park come back in for South Africa then. Not as a
Yeah.
dropping, but it means you end up with 2 games each and they both learn something, and likewise with 10, with centre, I want to see them rotated, but I think Stu has really thrown something in the mix there by going, actually, guys, maybe I'm the guy in form. Maybe it's time you back me for a change because you've never done that. And actually, sometimes when plans go out the window, it should be for reasons like that. Start Stockdale here, maybe give him another start elsewhere because James Lowe is an unbelievable player, has been an unbelievable servant, has not had his best calendar year. I think he'll hold his own hand up and say that. And, maybe give Tom Ahern 2 starts. Maybe Nick Timney gets his 5th cap for Ireland. I don't know. I'm not picking the team. But if we can feel like we're going forward, if we're sitting here next week and Ireland have put 60 points on Japan, and there's only 4 changes from last week, and those 4 changes are like Doris, Henderson, not to pick on these guys, but Doris, Henderson, Sam, and Robbie
Ackland.
Henshaw, then I feel like we're going to have a very different conversation.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
who'd be a head coach in that regard. But also at the same time, like, very easy PR points there if you want them there, lads. Do you know?
I feel like Joe Schmidt did these games so well in the
Oh
fact
yeah.
that he really valued, he almost saw like the likes of Australia at the time and Argentina at the time as good ways of we normally play them a week after Fiji, someone like Fiji, Samoa, USA. You play your good player, you play your new players there, and then you bleed them in with Australia or Argentina. Like, like it was one of those where I think Joe Schmidt did that so well in terms of, I'm thinking back to like Craig Gilroy, for example, played a really good game for the Wolfhounds. Then he
I think
played the
the
week after for
the best
Argentina.
example is Dave Foley of Munster. Second row, got man the match in Ireland debut. He was phenomenal, and he got backed a week later against a higher caliber team.
Yeah.
Do you know?
But like
And that's what we
it's
want to see
those
this
type
week. We
things.
want to see.
Yeah.
Okay, McCarthy made his debut last week, so it's a bit different. But if Craig Casey starts this one, again, I'm using him because he's up for media, and he plays well. Craig Casey played well against Australia last year. There's absolutely no fear of him against Australia. He'll be fine. Do you know? Stu is an older example, but he's an example. Do you know, if Tommy O'Brien gets backed again and he plays really well, he starts next week. And so on and so forth. It just feels very easy. But just really quickly, David, I'll come to you on this. Um, Ireland also played that game against the Spanish. Sorry, it's Ireland XV against Spain, I believe, not Spain A, but
Yeah.
Spain. Ireland should win. I think they'll get pushed around a bit physically, but to kind of lean on that Munster point, because I'll come on to that in a minute for their game against Argentina. The likes of Evan O'Connell played well last week. Ron Quinn played well last week. We don't need to talk about the form of Nathan Doak, Jack Murphy, and Jude Postlewaite. We've already done that. Likewise with the likes of Alex Soroka and Fintan Gunn and Harry Byrne. Like, big opportunity for these guys. Yes, it's not a cap. And yes, we want to see them cap next year. A lot of the guys who impress in this game. But if they go out there and they perform and they continue for their URC form, at the very least, forget about Ireland. We can say, do you know what? They're going to bounce back into the provinces, and that is brilliant.
Yeah. And it should be like, everybody wants to get a cap and everyone wants to at least be able to say at the end of their career, I was an Irish international. It doesn't matter. I mean, if you only get one, you'd rather get more. But at the end of the day, if you get to go out and say, I was an Irish international, if I was Hugo Keenan, I'd still walk around going, I'm an Olympian. Doesn't matter that we didn't win a medal. We went. It's still pretty fucking cool.
We were robbed,
Um,
David. We were robbed. Don't bring that up.
So but I think it's important, and for these lads, like a lot has been made of Andy Farrell and whether or not he keeps enough guys in the loop. This is like proof positive that you are in the loop. At least, that if something goes wrong or if something goes right, um, that you're in the running, that this is a shop window. Put yourself out there. I hope Spain rough us around. I don't want us to run up a cricket score on them. I want it to be a proper game. But this should be the opportunity that these guys should be hungry for, to go. This is your chance. You get to go out, you get to play some nice rugby, you get to play it with lads. It's a really nice spread. I was looking at the numbers. It's a really nice spread across all four provinces. Um, it is a perfect opportunity to go out and play some representative international rugby and show why, next time around, or if something happens next week, you're the next guy that Andy Farrell wants in his main squad. And I hope that the lads called up all see it as that, because it should be for them a perfect opportunity to go out and just play some really nice rugby and show the kind of form that a lot of those lads that you just mentioned have shown at provincial level. Because I'd look across that squad again, and yeah, they've been playing lovely rugby at URC level. A lot of those lads almost immune from the vagaries that have afflicted some of the actual frontliners. These lads have been playing really nice rugby, so I just want to go out there and do that in a green jersey and show why they should keep being put in one.
Yeah, I would agree. And I do hope that, look, I hope both Irish teams win. I think that goes without saying, but I hope we do see those performances because if I, as I always say, I just want to see the provinces do well because I firmly believe the provinces doing well will feed into the national team. I don't think it has to be the other way around. Some people disagree. That's absolutely fine as well. Before I get your predictions, I'm just going to touch on Munster Argentina at the weekend. I was there, I was covering it as I said. And first things first, these games are what makes Munster's history that little bit more, a little bit more of a book than a pamphlet because they've played loads of these games. The first Northern Hemisphere club to now beat all four major Southern Hemisphere nations. Um, and I do think, genuinely, having been on those press calls last week, having watched like Luke Murphy's interview, and not my place to tell his story, but he kind of touches on it in the interview at Munster on social media. To see it, it does mean a lot. It does mean a lot for these young lads, like it would have done for, Ian Nagel in 2010 and for, Darren Sweetnam in 2017 or 2016 against the Maori All Blacks. It genuinely means a lot for these young lads to go out there and say, I beat Argentina in Thomond Park. I beat South Africa down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. Do you know? And kind of like what you said about Ireland caps, it does mean a lot to do it in a Munster shirt, and that came across. And like loads of lads play well. I thought Evan O'Connell was phenomenal. I think there's a young lad playing the second row beside him, Connor Ryan, who's just gone under the radar. He is tough as nails. Like I watched him playing for UCC in the All Ireland League there a few weeks ago. He looked like a pro. He's only been on a pro contract since summer, and he looked like a pro in that game. Do you know? He's like 22, I think. I think he's a little bit older. He was on a development deal. Evan O'Connell was phenomenal in this game. Tony Butler probably had the game we've been waiting, where he just bossed things and he looked really, really sharp. And Ben O'Connor was really good as well. Probably the only one that played the other day that you'd have been like, oh, pity we're not seeing him in Ireland Green next week with the XV team because he has got emerging Ireland minutes. He looked really sharp. But again, Munster are 6 from 6 to start the season. I think they're in a very good place. I think the vibes on the field seem really, really good. I've heard more about from Jack O'Donoghue than I've heard from my own friends in recent weeks. He's been up for press nearly every week, it feels like. But when Jack O'Donoghue speaks, you listen because he's been through it. And you can always tell what's your filibuster and there's a genuine buzz and you can just sense it. And I think it's great for the province, but also just great to have these games. I'd love to see more of them for Connacht, Ulster, Leinster as well. I'd love to be able to go and see them, Let's go see fucking Argentina in the Dexcom or go see South Africa in Belfast or whatever it might be. But look, we might get onto that next week when Ben's on as well. But just an unbelievable result for them. But gentlemen, predictions for this weekend. I know we don't have team sheets. We won't be doing that this week. Maybe for the South Africa game, we shall see if we'll do a special preview show. Adam, I'll start with yourself. Ireland against Japan and Ireland against Spain. What do you want to see? What do you expect to see? And who's going to win?
I want to see a fun game, both games. I want to see the likes of like a KC Prendergast partnership in the Japan game. I want to see good running rugby from both teams. I want to see quite a fun team against the Spanish as well. But as David said, Spain hopefully can rough them up a bit to try and get them to push in for that international sphere. But yeah, I want to see. Of course, I want to see an Ireland win. I want to see an Ireland win by 30 points at least, against Japan, and I want to see an Ireland win by 25. Actually, no, I'd say more about 40 points against Spain, I reckon.
Yeah, well, scoreline doesn't really bother me. I think Ireland will win both. I think they'll beat Japan more than they'll beat Spain, personally. But sure, we'll see on that one. I could be really wrong, but I'm just going to go for 2 Ireland wins. And sure, that counts anyways. David, yourself, to round things off?
Yeah, I hope for 2 good games. I might really live to regret saying this. I hope both Japan and Spain come out and give a good accounting of themselves. I have a worry. I know Japan suffered during COVID with a lack of tier one opposition, and they've kind of slipped a little bit from where they were in say 2019, which granted was 6 years ago, but still, that loss to South Africa last week was pretty rough. I'd like to see a little bit more from them. I still think Ireland should be able to, or should at least be aiming for a 3-score win in that game, and so I'm going to say that's what I'm aiming for there. Spain, like I said, I'd really like to see them ruffle Ireland's feathers in that game. But I do, if I had to put hand on heart and say honestly, just looking at the team guys we have put out there, they're very good players. They're battle hardened. They've been playing URC rugby for the last 5 weeks and playing it well. I have a sneaking suspicion that the Spain game could go the same way as the Portugal game over the summer. But I'll be happy to be proven wrong if Spain can show up and put some manners on the lads.
Well, we shall wait and see. That Ireland, New Zealand. I'm on the wrong week again. The Ireland Japan game is live on RT2, TNT Sport, and whoever shows your Quilter Nation Series games, while Rugby Pass TV has it for free online across the world for Ireland XV against Spain. Gentlemen, we will leave it for that for tonight. We didn't get onto the Thigburn red card. I think we can unanimously say we all thought it was a little bit silly, and we think it'll be rescinded. I think that's the nice way to end it. And we won't get into the fact that there's the same TMO that didn't notice the vampire moment of the Women's World Cup. Anyways.
I will say just one thing, and this is not trying to be controversial or anything. I do think it'd be something to watch out for. There was a lot of talk about the 20-minute red card and whether or not it was efficacious and whether or not it's a good way to go with, regards to head contact and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I would be curious to see if we're more likely to see 20-minute red cards because they're viewed by the officials as being a less severe penalty. So it'd just be something to keep an eye on in future.
I think that's a good one.
I think I mentioned that last week with a soft red card and a hard red card. There's going to be that now, and I feel like that was a soft red card. Do you know what I mean?
It was just ironic that it came in an American football stadium where they have those types of coming togethers every week. And if you skipped off when I started saying thank you, you missed that wonderful little nugget from us. But anyways, you have to listen to the whole show. We'll leave it at that. We'll be back next week. Hopefully Ben will be back as well to discuss Ireland against Japan and Ireland against Spain in its entirety. But until next time, make sure to like, subscribe, stay tuned, listen to all the Global Game Line podcasts. But until then, take it easy. Thanks for listening.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.